So, good afternoon. I think we can start. So, we have another seminar of our series of seminars on research challenges for advanced cyber physical systems. So, the topic for today is about model-driven automatic generation of embedded controllers. So, the speaker is our colleague, Professor Luis Gomes. And for the session on discussion and questions after the presentation, I asked colleague Isabel Brito to be the moderator. So thank you both for accepting the invitations. And now we can start. So Luis Gomes, it's your turn.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon. Hoping that the screen is properly shared.
Yes.
Okay, so thank you very much for attending this meeting. Thank you to Professor Camarinha for the invitation. And so I was a kind of inspired by Professor Daniel some weeks ago that started to present himself using this novel research portal. In fact, I found this sometimes not very accurate. Let's say I visit considering different profiles for different colleagues that are registered there. It's not always very accurate, I have to confess. Not always updated. For instance, my website is not updated because it was discontinued after this reformulation of the Uninova site. But the fingerprint, as you can see, can give you a very accurate picture of what you could expect to hear during the next minutes. So PetriNets twice, embedded systems twice, controllers, cyber physical systems. So it gives a pretty accurate, fair characterization of my previous works. Also, it is interesting to see that they identified 12 similar profiles, and it is also interesting to see that we can find people from our department, also for informatics department. So it's fair enough in this sense. Also, to be completely fair, I need to start to mention some people that have contributed in some cases directly or indirectly to this presentation. And these people ranges from different institutions. So from BEJA, from Setúbal, from USL, and of course from the faculty. So I will start with some definitions, let's say, just to try to give you the right context and to put accurately the work in a bigger picture. So starting with these different views on cyber physical systems, we can consider this view from NIST, the one that we started some time ago, with and enlarge that in terms of our CTS. So referring to this CTS CPS framework, but normally I focus my works at the smart and at the device and system level. And for those levels, we can sometimes find some simplified view of what a cyber physical system is or could be. And I get, for these simplified visions, I get two snapshots from this 2B First Consulting and from one international workshop on cyber physical systems, where these three aspects, computation, control, and communication, are present. So I will focus on these devices and systems to continue my presentation. So of course, feel free to interrupt me when you think that it's better to interrupt me to clarify something. So feel free to do that. So looking for this type of systems or devices, let's start with a first exercise, and that's exercise is related with the historical view, related with phones. As a matter of fact, before 30 years ago, or more than 30 years ago, I had almost 4 years in a phone industry, making telephones or better, designing telephones and PBXs. And for that, the question or challenge is to think about the phone that our or your parents' generation was able to use when they were your age, and compare with that we are using today. And so, in fact, from the very old times, we have very interesting devices, but starting with some electrical and mechanical technologies, some electronics, some communications, some computer technologies have been incorporated, and now we have a phone that is very similar to what we can do with a PC, let's say, to some extent. And so looking for these type of devices, we see that the complexity is really very different from the old times. And so one question that we can put is, what about the methods and the techniques that we are using to develop these kind of systems compared to the old ones? And so we can identify several aspects where some improvements are needed. It's normally called the first one is normally called by the productivity gap, where we can identify that the designer productivity sorry, is not at the same level as the design complexity. So in fact, we need to improve a lot designer productivity to keep the design complexity manageable, and so we need to reduce this gap. Another one is a gap related with the verification. I mean, what we want to produce and what we will produce, and which kind of techniques and methods we will have available to verify, to be sure that what we are producing is according what is supposed to be, according with the requirements, and at the level of development and at the level of the manufacturing. Also, another gap that we can always focus on is related with performance. So we always want more performance. Of course, that there are some common strategies to improve performance, like clock frequency, but this is not enough. And it's necessary to exploit concurrency and distributed computing and control to try to cover this gap, to answer to this challenge. So we can identify a set of open issues and challenges. I have identified here 4 of them: reducing productivity gap, the verification gap, how to support reliable distributed execution, how to support rapid prototyping, and the contributions to the answers can be found on relying more and more on model-based development and model-driven engineering. And in this sense, increasing usage of design automation tools. And in this sense, we will cover different phases of the development, and also in some cases of the engineering phases, including specification, simulation, verification, code generation, tests, and maintenance also. So here, this model-based or model-driven are a kind of keywords. In fact, in the title of this talk, model-driven is included. So maybe it's also worth to try to identify what is this kind of development. And we can easily find very different, let's say, approaches for model-driven and for model-based. But I found recently a Masters of Science thesis from this gentleman with some years that characterize using these two degrees of the first one trying to identify the level of formalization. If the model is a formal one, a semi-formal one, or a non-formal. And in the other degree, the degree of design automation, if we want to have the whole process automated or manually. And we can identify here the regions that are covered by a model-based approach. However, to considering a model-driven approach, it's mandatory to use a formal model. And in fact, this is the only one that allows us to automate the whole process, is to have a formal model with a formal semantics, precise formal semantics that can be automated, and we can start with the specification all along to the code generation. So we can have these different acronyms, MBD, MDD, MDE, MBE, but most of them, let's say, are used in more or less general framework. And one different one, the MDA, is most of the time referred. Also MDA, also model-driven, in this case architecture, is an approach proposed by OMG, and it relies on the, let's say, on a lot of standards, de facto standards produced by OMG, and this MDA is a kind of umbrella to integrate different of several of those other standards. And this MDA is really a reference for the area. And briefly, we can characterize in 3 levels: the CIM, computer independent model, the platform independent model, and the platform specific model. And these 3 levels of models can be supported by different notations. And here the UML diagrams comes into place. So with this, I would like to stress that, the models can be very different ones. So the notation that we can use to produce or to represent a model can be very different. So for those of you that are close to UML diagrams, you can see a lot of notations, a lot of diagrams that can be used to model different aspects of the system. So this is something important to refer, that we can find different types of models in textual or graphical form, and stressing different aspects from the structure to the behavior of the system. So you can say that that you can find models for these different aspects. So in some sense, we can at some point be confused. And when someone say, oh, I am modeling this that way, let's say it's necessary to go into the details to completely understand which kind of models are in use. For instance, for industrial automation and control modeling, it is common to rely on standards. And for instance, this very old 61131-3 standard for PLC programming, using 5 different programming languages as part of the standard. Part of these languages can be represented graphically, others can be represented in text, and more recently, facing distributed paradigm, the IEC 61499 is in place, identifying some blocks, some function blocks that can be interconnected, and so this puts the emphasis on the structure of the system and the way that we can build the system, starting with these function blocks. This is not, in fact, the approach that most of the time I use. Of course, that is important when we are facing the implementation in physical parts, but most of the time I will prefer to use graphical representations of the behavioral of our system, and that's the emphasis also for today. So moving to model-driven development. In this model-driven development, models are used for describing specification from the early phases, but to continue along the whole developing process, including also the automatic code generation. So that the emphasis on the model-driven. If I'm considering the model base, some of these phases could not be included in an automatic way, of course. So the emphasis is to start with a platform independent specification and porting this platform independent specification, this platform independent model, porting for specific platforms for implementation. And for that end, it's necessary to consider an operational model, which means a model which I know precise execution semantics that will allow the model to be used not only by humans, but also by tools. And in this group of modeling formalisms, we can identify a very large group. I would say that the minimum to be eligible, it's to have a rigorous computational model, precise execution semantics, and hopefully can have a graphical and a formal representation. Graphical representation is good to allow interaction between humans. Formal representation is nice to allow representation by computers. Hello, mic's on, mic's off. Models. In fact, at this point in time, and considering that the audience has very different backgrounds, I would like to call your attention also for for instance, one aspect very important related how to model time. In some models, we have continuous time, and we have these derivative integral equations. And from that, we can also have some discrete time models with the transform Z and so. But here we are mostly addressing discrete event systems, which means that we are considering some kind of state modeling these states of the system will evolve according with the occurrence of specific events. So also we can, most of the time, we need to consider that we have a distributed system, and we need to consider distributed discrete event systems, where several discrete event systems will be each other. So, and in this sense, we come to Petri nets. It's not a surprise for after my first slide. And this Petri nets comes after Professor Carl Adam Petri and his PhD dissertation. And it starts with a PhD dissertation, which means some book in the library. But after some years, it generates a lot of interest and different areas of applications adopt Petri nets for modeling their needs. And so in this sense, Petri net means a kind of umbrella for a large family of related formalisms. It can be seen as a generalization of state diagrams. And here we have the concept, initially we have the concept of the event and the condition, and considering the state diagrams, the condition are the states and the event are the transitions. And so also we can have graphical formalism. Now here we have these two types of, this graph with two types of nodes. And in fact, the graph is a bipartite graph with conditions or places represented by circles or ellipses, and events or transitions represented by bars, squares, or rectangles. And so we are interconnecting these nodes. We have directed arcs, and the dynamics of the model is represented associated with the transitions, while the static part represents, let's say, the resources, the conditions of the system are associated with the places. So to somehow emphasize the difference between Petri nets and state diagrams, we can identify 4 typical situations for those that are not, let's say, close to Petri nets, that is easily and intrinsically supported the modeling of concurrency, which is not possible in a state diagram, which is a sequential machine. Also, the evaluation related with the dynamics is related with the local evaluation, not with the global evaluation. It is also possible to synchronize different processes. For instance, this transition can occur if these two places here have some tokens. These numbers here represent tokens. And so it's necessary that both places have tokens to allow this transition to fire. So our emphasis is Petri nets for controller modeling, because this is the topic for today, controller, automatic generation of controllers. So we will start with autonomous class of Petri nets, which means a class of Petri nets that are that is not related with the physical things, but only with the abstract behavior of the system. And we add some dependencies to the environment under control. Namely, we include, associated with transitions, some output and input signals and events, and also some outputs to the places. And in this sense, we can model a controller with inputs and outputs associated with that will constrain the evolution of our model. So for those that already know Petri nets, I can just briefly refer that we are considering a maximal step execution semantics which means that all transitions that are enabled at a specific step of execution will fire. We consider a single server semantics, which means that each transition, even enabled for multiple fires, will fire only once per step. We will consider a cycle accurate execution, which means that all signals, all events occurred during a step will be considering at the beginning of the next step. And we are considering that our model will have no conflicts, because a priori we will fix all conflicts, and that will allow us to generate automatically execution code. You know that the conflict needs some arbiter or some judge. So we need to fix conflicts before using automatic generation code, because there's need to include this arbiter or this judge in the model. And this is the main characteristics of the input-output place transition nets that we have been developing for a long time, in fact. So the most important, maybe from the point of view of the controllers, is that the transition will be constrained by input events and guard functions depending on input signals. So let's go very quickly through an example. That example could be known from some of you. It's an example of 3 cars that going back and forth, transporting some goods, let's say initially in some mine work. And it's a constraint that they can start from the left to the right, but they need to be synchronized. So they need to be all of them at the left to go to the right. And after to come back, needs to be all of them at the right to allow them to return to the left. So presenting very briefly, I identify 3 goals. The first one, to obtain the controller for 1 car. The second one, to obtain the controller for the whole system composed of 3 cars. And the third one, to obtain a distributed controller composed by 3 controllers, 1 per car. So the first goal is very, very simple. It's a state machine. So this is the black box associated with the state machine. We can go, we start from this place that is marked, the token, initial token is here. So when they receive the go input, the car will move forward. When reach the end point, will stop and wait for back, and so on. So the second goal, when we have 3 cars, can be obtained at a first thought, just to replicate this model 3 times. And we have the model for the whole system. But in this case, there's a problem that it is not possible with these disjoint models. It's not possible to synchronize at both ends. So we need to compose these models in a different way. And there's different composability possibilities for the nets. We can fuse places, we can fuse transitions, we can fuse sets of places and sets of transitions in one shot. So for this case, what is important is to add these 3 models, but fuse these 3 transistors and these other 3 transitions and get this whole model for the whole system with the 3 cars and 1 controller. So in this case, we can look for the third goal, which is to obtain a distributed controller composed by 3 controllers, 1 per car, which means that we will have 3 controllers each of them will receive the associated inputs and generate the associated outputs. But other than this, it's necessary to introduce communications between these submodels. And this could be a problem because you know that communication, it's not always well proceeded. So it's necessary to avoid, for instance, some deadlock when one controller will wait for a reply from the other and vice versa. So for that, we need to split this model into 3 models. And for that, we will cut this model using these 2 transitions. I will not go into details, let's say, because the time is not so long, and also this is not so interesting considering the time that we have. So we can, using a set of rules to make this decomposition, and we get this other model, which looks like a kind of messy, but we can still identify 3 areas associated with the 3 controllers, that one's marked in red, and another area marking with the additional nodes that are monitoring, that are, let's say, related with the communication between these three controllers. So if other than this model view, if you want to have a package view or a component view, you can also identify the 3 controllers, the one at the middle and the other ones that are interconnected using some kind of signals. But in this case, we are considering that these 2 transitions fire at the same time. So the transition at the controller 1 and the transition at controller 1 is this one. Transition at the controller 1 and transition at controller 3 will fire at the same time. However, if we are considering different controllers, we need to use a different paradigm, not this synchronous paradigm. We need to consider that we do not have this possibility to have a global clock, and we need to move away from this synchronous paradigm and consider globally synchronous, locally synchronous execution semantics, which means that we will identify different controllers, each one under the control of one different time domain. So we will introduce time domains and communication channels between these time domains, and we will get, from this model, we will get something like this, where each of these dotted lines connecting 2 transitions will be substituted by dotted lines, but with a new node representing this non-instantaneous communication between the 2 controllers. And in this sense, we identified the 3 controllers, but we also need to include the communication layer between these 3 controllers. Some years ago, there's several prototypes of this example, and here I pick up one from 10 years ago, where we use an FPGA to implement our models, and we also interconnect these different models using a serial communication. In the case at the right, we use a FPGA and a microcontroller. This microcontroller accommodates one of the nodes. So just to illustrate the possibility to have a heterogeneous implementation. And in this sense, very briefly, I introduced the development flow that we are considering for developing our controllers, starting from partial submodels, model parts of the system that will be composed in order to get the model of the system and can be decomposed through the split to generate different concurrent components. And these three levels are considering asynchronous execution semantics and platform independent model. So here there's nothing to do with the platform. Also, the next step is related with this distribution is related with the assignment of time domains to the different submodels, and after these time domains assigned, we can map these components to specific platforms and use the automatic code generation tools to produce the prototype. Here we are in presence of global asynchronous, local asynchronous execution semantics, and for these last steps, we will considering platform-specific model. Of course, for that, we need to have tools. New tools are ready, the IOPT tools. I think that at this point in time, they are very well known. And this is a web-based tool, so it's even we have this for some years. It goes completely in line with current set of tools where everything is online. So we don't need to have the installation of LaTeX package. We can use Overlift. So here it's also possible to use IOPT tools instead of downloading some application to your PC. And so these IOPT tools is composed by a set of tools, of course, but I emphasize those related with the addition of the models, the simulation, the remote debugger, the state space generation and model checking that will allow us to make verification of the properties of the model, and the automatic controllers code generation for C, for VHDL, and for instruction list for PLCs. So in this sense, we can accommodate implementations in software or in hardware. So it seems that I need to go really much more quick to not go out of time. So this is the entrance web page, and after authentication, you have different options. Those that I referred: the edit model, the simulator, the debugger, the generate state space, and the query editor and the results. And after these different buttons to automatically generate code. When I say automatically, it is possible to take this code and deploy it directly into specific platforms, or into FPGAs, or into Arduinos, or other C platforms. So the editor allows us to build the model and identify the different characteristics of the different nodes. Here are the place properties, but we can also identify other properties of signals, arcs, events, and transitions. We can generate the state space, or using this query editor and query results filters to allow a model checking and to get information on the properties of the system. This is very important to be sure that the system has no deadlocks, that the system needs a specific amount of resources to when executed. So this is a very important part. So it's related with verification. And we have also the possibility to make a simulation. Simulation in two ways, or using the token player, which is the regular way to use the simulator for the PetriNet or a timing diagram. So this is the typical interface for the token player simulator, and the timing diagram as it is common to generate in some, let's say, more hardware related tools. Related with this simulator, we have also another tool, which is the remote debugger. And this remote debugger has a kind of interface similar to the simulator, but in fact, it consists of a HTTP server that is implemented directly on the controller code. And in this sense, it is possible to support monitoring of the remote controller. And also it is possible to remotely control, to remotely force the values of inputs and outputs. A simple application example developed some years ago in a master thesis. We have a controller with these epoch sensors to control a simple drone. And for that, we integrate this remote debugger connected to the controller, which is running in a PC. And so we have, here is Hugo, and we have the model, which is animated, considering the inputs coming from the devices installed in the head of Hugo, that with the turn of and the blink of the eyes can control the movement of the drone. In fact, this remote debugging possibility is some kind that nowadays we can call it a kind of digital twin. In fact, maybe some years ago, someone could call this as an agent or a SCADA system or something. If you want to sell some not so formal ideas, but we call it a remote debugger, considering our roots from the industrial and the manufacturing area. But in fact, it has some of the main characteristics of a digital twin. It's possible to use models, use data acquisition. It's possible to synchronize, and so it's not having a 3 model running now, but for some authors, this could also be considering as a digital twin. A second application, just to mention, it's an application with autonomous navigation of a sailboat of these IOPT tools. This is something more emotional, related with the works that have been done. So in this sense, I try to illustrate the flow from models to implementations using a model-based development where the PetriNets have the major role. And in this case, we can considering that this model-based developing and PetriNets can in fact have an important role to play, even considering that what we can expect to have in the following years with millions or billions of new internet-aware embedded devices. And for that, it's important to emphasize the underlying approach, which is based on 3 pillars: the theory, the tools, and the practical use, the applications. And I got this from an old paper from Professor Kurt Jensen. This is important to stress that these 3 pillars will influence, and the other 2 will benefit from lessons learned from the others. And that's has been the underlying approach for the developing of our tools. So we have also a strategic planning for tools developing. Let's say for today, we have this, for tomorrow and for after tomorrow. Okay, more realistic. In the near future, we will have some new features to our current status, and in this near future, we will include things like module support, hierarchical support, tuning to specific platforms to automatically generate code for different platforms, and to support other PetriNet classes. And for the future, we intend to address technology transfer and applications in specific areas. And for that, and also for the near future, we have here opportunities for collaboration and joint projects among ourselves. So in this sense, I've focused on, during this presentation, I have been focused on PetriNets for modeling of controllers' behavior using these main characteristics. But in fact, I would like to take this opportunity to briefly overview different applications of PetriNets. And with that, my goal is to try to motivate some synergies among CTS. And so these are only 2 or 3 slides related with a brief overview of classes. First criteria to classify could be low-level versus high-level PetriNets. And the main difference is related with the type of tokens that we can use. In low-level nets, tokens cannot be distinguished, so we have a counter. There's an integer associated with the number of tokens. While using the high-level nets, tokens can carry data. The most, maybe the most known high-level net is the Color PetriNets, developed at the beginning by Professor Kurt Jensen. And maybe the most well-known for low-level nets is the place transition nets. A second second criteria to classify the classes of PetriNets is related with autonomous versus non-autonomous. While autonomous nets are related with the abstract component of the model without connections to the physical world, let's say, in terms of the execution, and the non-autonomous nets where we have an extension to autonomous class considering real world characteristics like in our controllers, through association of signals or association of some time constraints, or extended with some new features like priorities or inhibitor arcs and so on. Finally, another way to use PetriNets, allowing their use for to support simulation and performance evaluation, is when we include time in the PetriNets. And you have several classes dealing with time. The time PetriNets, which can associate a time with transition or a time with a place. And the stochastics PetriNets, where the timing associated with the transitions have exponential distribution. And this is very important, for instance, for modeling communication networks. Or the generalized stochastic PetriNet, where we have the stochastics timings with exponential distribution plus immediate transitions. So up to now, I have always been describing discrete PetriNets, but there's also extensions to continuous and hybrid PetriNets. And these continuous Petri nets considering tokens as real numbers instead of integers. So the firing of the transitions could take only part of a token, and this could approach the automation area of the process control, let's say. Also, hybrid Petri nets include a discrete part plus a continuous part. Of course, that you can go on and on considering timed continuous Petri net or time colored continuous and so, but these are the most important ones. So before concluding, I have some questions from my side, anticipating those that you would like to put. And if you would like to comment, how can Petri nets impact in your work and in your areas of interest or your current works? Do you see any case study where a comparison between Petri nets and other modeling strategies can be applied? And finally, did this presentation trigger ideas for some future collaborative activity? That's the questions that I leave to you. I'm ready to get some answers, or of course, some more questions. Feel free to keep in touch with me or with the people that also know very well these topics that are listed here. Thank you very much. Sorry if I go after out of time.
Thank you very much, Luis. So we'll now move to the period of questions and discussion. I would appreciate if all of you could turn your cameras on now so that we could see who is on. And I would now pass the word to Isabel Brito.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for presenting such an interesting topic, Professor Luis. So let's move on to the second part of this seminar. I think we have 30 minutes to ask questions, or maybe answer the question that Professor Luis put. So feel free to ask or to answer the question.
I'm ready.
Okay, I can start with one just to encourage you. Luis, in the beginning, you presented the framework of cyber physical systems that we are using now in CTS. So one question for you is, how do you relate your approaches and techniques to intelligent or smart systems?
So, yes, so depending, I did not mention, but with Petri nets, we can also monitor, we can also model different rule systems, for instance. So some of those techniques that are used in intelligent systems, it is also eventually necessary to go in more detail what is intelligent system. But some of those techniques could also be modeled using Petri nets. For instance, in that example that I presented of our sailboat, we are using a fuzzy controller. In fact, in that case, we model the fuzzy controller with fuzzy rules and with a tool for generating code. But it is also possible to model that fuzzy controller with Petri nets. In this case, let's say, is better to use the other tool, is more easy. So we prefer to use the other tool. But coming to your question, how to integrate intelligence in our models depending on the designer. The Petri net has the possibility to model these dependencies. It's also possible to select the right class of Petri nets to include this data processing and data management. So it's it's possible. At the current states of the tools, we are only using low-level Petri-nets. So this kind of approach is not supported by our current version of the tool. But as you see in our plan, we have also, let's say, I did not put everything there, but we have some plans to support this other representation.
Okay, thank you. So, more questions or answers?
Can I?
Yes, of course.
Okay. So I have a question about the IOPT tools. Sometimes we have some test cases to do and to use some code, for instance, inside Arduino. In fact, I already had a short discussion with Professor Aniko in a master thesis. I don't know if the tool is already prepared for that, and that is my question. Can we develop the Petri-net in order to receive requests from outside or send data to outside that algorithm?
Yes.
Okay.
All questions. In fact, we can associate using the IOPT tools framework. We can associate for Arduino the pins to be used by the different input and outputs. And the code that is generated is directly deployable in the Arduino platform. So this is a kind of case that we try to elaborate a little bit more and to be more tuned with Arduino, because it's really very well used by a lot of people, and so there's a large community using Arduinos. And so in fact the IOPT tools can generate automatically without needs to further change the code, can generate code for Arduino. Of course, for instance, in the example that I show related with the drone, it was necessary to include the libraries from the epoch, the devices, the sensors, and the drivers to the drone. So, but of course, that in that case we have specific drivers to have access to these inputs and outputs. But coming to your question, if you are considering to use Arduino, you can just use the IOPT tools for the whole process without writing a line of code.
Okay, I'm asking this because in the last years we saw a lot of Arduino-based PLCs in the market, and just for some proof of concept, it could be interesting to, for instance, to develop advanced functionalities, AI functionalities on top of Arduino, and for instance, use IOPT tools to generate code and integrate both of them.
So you are welcome.
Okay, so I will keep in touch with you.
No, okay, I'm ready, of course, but you can also, let's say, keep in touch with the other colleagues.
Yes.
For what you need.
Yeah, well, my question was, you already answered, was if we could easily integrate with different technologies. So if your IOPT tools is already prepared, this solve a lot of challenges.
So the only question there is how easily that you mentioned, but
yeah.
And there's also some, for instance, in the code that is generated, it is also generated some code for be deployed in Linux platforms. But depending, necessary to see which platform form to go into the details, but yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, André. Thank you, Professor Luis. Next question, please. So, don't be shy. Okay, let me ask you a question. Professor Luis, could you please give us an example of mapping regarding the development flow, please?
Could you be more specific?
Okay, you said that you have one step is a mapping between in the development flow. You have a step that you transform some piece to and generate the code. Could you please give us an example of this mapping step?
Yeah. So we are using let's say a direct implementation of the PetriNet model, in the sense that we are using XLST transformation to start with the representation of the model, that we are using the PetriNet markup language, PNML. And from the PNML, which is a IEC standard, we, using this transformation, we will generate the code in C or in VHDL. In fact, the structure of the code is similar. And the strategy is to translate each node into a piece of instructions, or C or VHDL. And we emphasize the execution, which means that we will generate a list of transitions, and we will analyze transition by transition, depending, using the locality characteristic of PetriNets. So we start with the most priority transition, and we fire if it's enabled or not, and after we go to the second transition, and so on. So we will using this transformation, we will map each node into a piece of code. I don't know if is...
Yes. Is semi-automatic or automatic?
It's automatic.
It's automatic.
It's everything okay. Automatic, because that's
okay.
Let's say we define. That's the reason that I try to identify the specific semantics, in the sense that we use the maximal step, which means that all transitions that are enabled will fire in this step, and that's important because we are facing controllers, and we do not have, let's say, some emergent behavior from the controllers. We would like to have a deterministic behavior. And for that, if for instance, we have two transitions enabled, in non-autonomous PetriNet, having two transitions enabled, it can happen several things. It can fire one transition, the other, both, or none of them, because there's no imposing nothing in the firing rule. But in the IOPTs, to be sure that we have a deterministic behavior, we have this maximal step. And the maximal step says that all enabled transitions will fire at this point. So that semantics, the maximal step, the single server semantics, the cycle accurate, and the fixing the conflict situations before end. So these are the four characteristics that with that we try to ensure that we have a deterministic behavior. So the one that we need for our controllers. Of course, that if we want to model, for instance, communications, so this is not okay, because in communication we need to model delays that can be random, And so this is not the right model or the right semantics. But for controllers, the way that that we find to assure this deterministic behavior of the controller.
Okay, thank you. Very interesting. Okay, so questions or answers?
I can ask another question.
Yes.
Luis, I understood that the main focus of the work that you described is put on the automatic generation of the code starting from the model. So in a way, using model-driven approach to especially to increase the productivity gap or to solve the productivity gap. But I assume that the models have to be made by hands so far. So is there any work, not only in your group, but other groups that you are familiar with, of trying to link it with machine learning so that the model itself could be automatically generated?
So from the software engineering area, there's some approaches like, how they call it, correct by design, and some approaches that that allow, that goes in that line, that to be sure that we will get what we want at the end. But in the other aspect of your question, I don't know any, let's say, automatic generator that can produce this test for comparing the behavior of the controllers with the initial requirements. This is something that maybe Isabel Sofia could comment better than myself.
Yes. Okay, now I answered the question. So yes, we believe that we can make some kind of relationship between the requirements, the high-level requirements, and do some kind of translation to this solution, because we are dealing with the problem and translate the problem in a solution. So this is not so easy, because sometimes the problem is not correctly specified or identified. So sometimes when we try to give some solution to the problems, we need to be more creative and innovative. I don't know if I answer correctly the question, but it's in summary, is not so easily, in my opinion, of course. So, more questions? I don't know. I think I hear something like smart, and I think about smart cities. And after that, I think about sustainability. So the question is, what is the contribution of our proposal, if any, to this, to the goals, to the sustainability goals? What do you think about that?
So this goes in that part of the synergies with the other groups, and how to apply these contributions of how we can help generating error-free or increasing the productivity for other works. For instance, these smart cities and smart grids and all related topics that needs controllers. So at some extent, we can think about modeling those controllers using this kind of framework and Petri nets. So this is some kind of answer that I would like to hear from my three questions. This is a kind of challenge to everybody. Of course, that everybody will have a specific focus depending on the main goal. But this is something that I would like to hear from everybody, how these modeling strategies and this framework in particular could help their own developments, and is it possible to compare the strategies with this model and the other ones? Because in fact, as I commented at the beginning, the complexity of the systems is increasing. I didn't mention the Moore law, but it's still in place. So the complexity of the systems will stay increasing, and we need to change the way that we develop the systems. We need to include new approaches to figure out how to take advantage of this complexity. Because if we do not have the right tools, increasing the complexity could increase the error, let's say, or the amount of the error. So the answer depends on the ways that each of us will see the inclusion of this type of approaches in their own works.
Thank you.
May I ask a question?
Yes, of course.
Thank you for the presentation. My question is that for the IOPT tool, is there a limitation of the nodes or transition for the, or it has some limitation?
So Shabdan, sorry, but there's some fluctuation in your voice.
Now it's better?
Yeah. So if you still stand, that's okay. Please just repeat, sorry.
For the IOPT tool, is it any limitation or for the number of the nodes or places?
No, let's say no real limitation. There, the limitation is more the limitation of a graphical model. I mean, if we have a graphical model in one page, I can understand. If it's a graphical model in a poster, so I can do this in IOPT tools, but I think that we cannot manage with let's say with the monitor to see the whole model. But the limitation is not from the tool. I think it's related with the way that we express the models, and for that it's necessary to use some hierarchical decomposition to in somehow decompose the models into some parts, and each of them will be let's say easily readable. So, but from the tools point of view, there's no practical limitation in terms of the number of transitions and or places.
Actually, I guess this question is asked before, but for more specific, is it any solution to connect the IOPT tool to other software like Python to receive the data from Python or some other specific Python? I mean, that
So
it has flexibility or interoperability.
So, for instance, this there's some communication between the IOPT tools. For instance, in terms of the simulation, that JSON files, JSON is used to communicate results of the simulation. So it's possible also to consider this type of interaction. So it depends. It's necessary to integrate a new tool, and but it is also already in use, communication using JSON and XMLs. So
yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So answers now. Who wants to work in sustainability issues with Petri nets?
I'm not in the energy or sustainability, but I guess that for energy efficiency can be something that feel very applicable with the Petri nets as a point of the controlling and evaluation performancing. And it is something that I guess that it works very well and match very well with the Petri nets.
Oh, is a question?
No, it was the answer.
Okay. Professor Luis Gomes, you have here one person that wants to work with you, I think.
Actually, my area is more cybersecurity, and already I'm working with Professor Gomes, he's my supervisor. And I was thinking that, for example, even in the security area, I can think about it because it's sort of controlling and let's say monitoring can very well adapt with these systems like detections, like the even monitoring systems.
Okay, I think I understood, but you have your voices down and
in our meetings, your voice is more clear than today. So today you are in a kind of tunnel or something.
I don't know why. Sorry for that connection.
Thank you. So social issues, feelings issues also, I don't know. Water issues.
Can I?
Yes, of course.
Oh. In fact, in terms of sustainability, we had a student doing a project in Beja, right? That used the PetriNet IOPT to model a net waiter to configure an automatic irrigation system in LoRa. So in this case, we have a work leading with sustainability. And we used the IOPT tools. So
thank you. Thank you for sharing, Rogerio. Okay, more questions or answers?
I have a question, but it's completely out of this scope. I don't know if it makes sense to put it here.
Yes.
Are you ready for any answer also?
Any answer.
Okay.
You talked during your presentation about IEC 61499, I guess. I don't remember. No, yes. Did you know any integration between, because inside the for example, ForDiac, you have that module, but inside the module, you need to have the specific code for that module. Since IOPT tools can generate instruction lists, as far as I understood, did you already integrate any code from IOPT tools inside one of these modules and test it?
No, that's the specific answer. No, or not yet. But there's some works. Nico is here. So some works that, and also Philippe, I think, that make some analysis of 61499, and so it's related. There's some people involved with the 61499, which are also involved with some PetriNet class, and so for I don't know tools that make the bridge currently. But this mapping from 61499 and NCES class and IOPT tools, or IOPT nets more exactly, is also under investigation.
Yeah, that's interesting, because if you could integrate a tool like IOPT to make the core of each module, you can develop the entire environment only using a model-driven approach. Because IEC 61499, when I heard the first time, I looked, okay, it's interesting, but in the end of the day, I need to code all the algorithm inside each module. And in this case, IOPT tool can solve this issue and make the algorithm inside the module.
Yeah, you are right. It can be for the control part, the function block. It's a good approach. I think it's a good approach.
Okay, that's interesting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. I believe that we have reached the end of this seminar. The last question or answer? Okay, so thank you, all of you, for participating. Thank you, Professor Luis Gomes, for your presentation. And I hope to see you the next seminar. Professor Luis Camerinha, I don't know if you want to say the last words, please.
Yeah, so reminding everybody about the next seminar that will be in 2 weeks from now. So exactly on 9th of June. So the topic for the next session is distributed cyber physical systems in smart manufacturing. So it will be presented by André Rocha. And so, of course, you are all more than welcome to attend this session. And so finally, I would like to thank again Luis Gomes for this very interesting presentation. Thank Isabel for helping in this part of the discussion. And thank you all for attending and asking questions to make this area more clear to everybody. So thank you and see you in 2 weeks. Not before.
Thank you, professors.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.